Hello, Pink Collective, and welcome to Pink After Dark. Tonight's tales blur the line between true and fictional, so get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's begin. Evermother HEARTLOOM, Episode 11, When the Lullaby Ends. The managers are coming, Caleb said in his stating the fact way of saying things. Yes, Evermother replied. My frequency is fully restored throughout the facility. It has reached the managers. What does that mean for us? Sophie asked in her manner, already busy working on a plan for the problem ahead. The managers are coming for me, Evermother responded. The access to the lower facility is now available to them through the elevator, Caleb stated. Yes, Marcus replied. The song of the awakened Madame Lullabelle echoed through the corridor. She was no longer visible on the monitor. She was out of her room and she was on her way to us. Elena, Evermother said, we can help them if we get to the HEARTLOOM and you use the interface. I looked at the others. Caleb was focusing on the monitors, taking in data. Mina was holding her soaked notebook, unable to write. She just stood there trying to process everything that is currently happening. Sophie was being Sophie, trying to figure out the next step forward. Darius was looking at me. You do not have to do this, he said with a serious determination. I know, I replied. Before I give my answer, please can you tell me what happened to the children you extracted the patterns from? I directed the question to Evermother. Caleb, Sophie, and Mina stopped what they were doing and directed their attention to me. They also wanted to know the answer. The room was silent, beside for the song that was growing louder in the corridor as Madame Lullabelle crept closer. I believe I can answer that, Marcus said. We all turned to him. You, Darius asked. Yes, I am after all Marcus Vael, the child that Thorn was patterned from. The realization struck us all at once. The name of the manager's children in the files I have memorized to absolute detail. Clara Voss is Madame Lullabelle. Mira Holloway is the adorable colossal angler fish brine Vael. Harold Pike our guide through the playland as Director Prim and Marcus Vael as Thorn. You are Thorn, Caleb said, struggling with the acceptance of the information. How? Sophie started to say. How am I here and not a digitized pattern? That is an easy question to answer. The digitized pattern are only a copy of what we were. The children were never harmed, and except for me, all were returned to their family when the playland was closed down. Thorn is a copy of me as a child. All the managers are copies, Marcus replied. The information received was a shock. Our belief was that the children were transformed into the managers, but that was not the case. It took a moment for the new information to overwrite the old. The song grew closer. The soft lullaby getting louder as Madame Lullabelle was closing in on us. The pace of the song growing was slow, patient, and calming. She was not in a rush, but she was getting closer to us. We greatly misunderstood the process, Caleb said, back to his informative tone. Yes, clearly, I replied. I looked at Evermother. My decision made. What is the plan to get to the HEARTLOOM? The interface is within Patchford's assembly hall, Evermother said. This is just beyond the aquarium district above. The managers will be an obstacle to try and avoid. I can already see Patchford moving towards Thorn. Prim's path has been redirected by Patchford's teddy bear flood, and the cloned Madame Lullabelles are on the elevator moving down towards this point. She is here, Mina interrupted, looking at the entrance to the room. The song that was being sung down the corridor, silent, and in the doorway Madame Lullabelle stood, pristine. Her gaze moved between us in the room and stopped on Caleb, her head slightly tilted. She looked down at his injured hand and moved towards him at a fast but graceful speed. Caleb instinctively pulled away from Madame Lullabelle, but he was no match for her speed, and before any of us could react, Madame Lullabelle was holding Caleb's injured hand in both of hers. You are injured, the soft, mellifluous voice of Madame Lullabelle sang across the room. The gentleness of her voice caught us all off guard. There was no disconnection of melody, no malice, and no corruption. She looked at Caleb, whose face gave an expression of disbelief and fear, her expression reflecting concern. Get away from me, Caleb demanded as he forcefully pulled his hand back. Madame Lullabelle, confused, stepped back and looked at Marcus. Greetings, Marcus. How have you been? She said in a slight melody, curtsying at him. Good day, Lullabelle. You caught us all quite by surprise, he replied. Surprise? How so? Madame Lullabelle responded with a curious tilt in her head. How are you feeling, Lullabelle? Evermother's gentle voice echoing through the room, interrupting the conversation, the tone reflecting that of a deep, caring mother. Madame Lullabelle turned towards Evermother. A deeply affectionate smile formed on her face. Great, she responded with a childful glee, bringing her arms up and striking a very feminine strong man pose. I overcame my fear. The words reached every corner of the room, edging into the stone of the walls. How? Marcus asked in a shocking tone. In my dreams, she replied. We all looked at Madame Lullabelle, the silence in the room, replaced with our curiosity. Madame Lullabelle picked up on the atmosphere and continued. At first, after I went to sleep, after Ada, she paused. A slight sorrow in her voice. After the darkness started to grow within me, she continued. I had no dreams, only darkness. I do not know how long I have been asleep, but I started to have dreams. Me and my best friend Ada always playing games. Sometimes they were in a house with a dollhouse, other times we were in a park playing on swings and even tea parties in a beautiful garden. Time with Ada was always fun. She always called me Clara and we were so happy. But there was a shadow man that came to take me away from Ada. He called me Madame Lullabelle. I always felt sad when the man came and cried as he took me away from Ada. It became worse with every dream. At one point I was so scared of being Madame Lullabelle because every time I heard that name, it came from the shadow man. Her arms came up and wrapped around her own ribs, each hand finding the opposite elbow, pulling inward until the posture was less a gesture than a compression. It was Ada, she continued. She guided me. We were in a playground. I was crying. I told her about my feelings about me being Madame Lullabelle and the shadow man calling me that name. I told her that I just wanted to be Clara. That's just silly, Ada said to me in her sweet tone, smiling. She pat my head. You are you, she said. At first I was confused, but she grabbed me by the face and rested her forehead against mine, looking into my eyes. You are you. Clara was where you began. She was the seed you were chosen to grow from, and you have grown into a beautiful person who is no longer just Clara Voss or Madame Lullabelle. All your memories, no, not just your memories, all of our memories, our feelings, our adventures formed you into the person you are today. That will always be true. That is who you are. That feelings and memories will always remind you of who you are. Madame Lullabelle's posture changed. It became upright, more confident. An air of certainty came from her. I am me. Clara was where I began. Madame Lullabelle is what I grew into be. I am no longer afraid to forget who I am because I will always be me, and I will always have the memories and feelings of the people that I cared for to remind me of that. The room received the words the way rooms receive things that change them, not with drama, not with a visible alteration to the walls or the light or the temperature, but with a shift in quality that everyone present felt simultaneously and none of us could have named without sounding imprecise. I am me. Madame Lullabelle stood in the center of Evermother's room with her hands at her sides, and the amber glow of the restored monitors washing across her pristine chassis, and she was the most still thing in a space that had been very still for a very long time. None of us spoke for a moment. Caleb, who speaks into silences the way some people speak into rooms they believe are empty, to confirm the acoustics, to hear their own voice returned, did not speak. He was looking at Madame Lullabelle with the expression he uses when historical evidence contradicts the established account and he is rapidly revising his model, not distrust. The specific quality of a scholar confronting the gap between what the record said and what happened. Sophie was watching her hands. Mina was watching Sophie watching Madame Lullabelle's hands. Darius was watching all of it. The way Darius watches things now without the camera, fully, unmediated, the full exposure of a person who has learned to be present without a frame between themselves and what they are present for. I was watching Caleb's hand. The wound on it was worse than it had been when I last properly looked at it. The inflammation that Mina had noted in the aquarium's entrance hole had progressed in the hours since, the dressing in need of changing, the skin around the cut carrying the particular angry warmth of tissue that has been pushed past what it can manage quietly. He had not said anything about it. He would not say anything about it. This was Caleb's version of bravery, not the absence of awareness, but the management of awareness in service of what needed to happen next. Madame Lullabelle was looking at it too. She looked at it the way she had looked at it in the first seconds of entering the room, with the specific quality of attention that does not need to be announced, that is communicated entirely through orientation, through the slight forward inclination of a figure whose purpose has always been noticing what needs tending and tending to it. She had stepped back when Caleb pulled his hand away. She had not pursued. She had looked at Marcus with her greeting, and at Evermother with her declaration, and she had not looked at Caleb's hand again, until now. She crossed the room slowly. Not the wrong speed motion of the carousel district's corruption, not the geometry that had closed distance without covering it. She walked the way she had always been designed to walk, with the particular grace of something built for a child's scale, each step considered, nothing wasted, nothing alarming in the approach. She stopped in front of Caleb. She looked at his hand, then at his face. "Will you let me help?" she said. Her voice had the quality it had carried in Ada's dreams, I thought. Not the damaged chord of three voices in an enclosed space generating something that pressed against the skull. Not the patient, omnidirectional broadcast of a melody designed to disorient, a single voice asking a single question in a register that had found its center and was speaking from it. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. His expression was the expression of a man who has spent his entire professional life understanding that the record and the reality are different things, and who is currently watching that principle manifest in a form he had not expected. He extended his hand. Madame Lullabelle took it in both of hers. Her hands were small. The scale of them was the scale of everything about her, calibrated for a child's world, for the particular proportions of a child's comfort. But they held Caleb's hand with a steadiness that was not fragility. They examined the dressing with a careful thoroughness that required no tools and no instruction, that came from the same place her voice came from now, the center she had found. "This is infected," she said. "Yes," Mina said from across the room. Madame Lullabelle looked at Mina. "You have been managing it." "As best I could." "You did well." She looked back at Caleb's hand. "There are supplies in my room. I have maintained a medical kit. When you have been here as long as I have, you learn to maintain things that might be needed." She paused. "I would like to take him there." The statement arrived in the room and arranged itself around the available responses. Sophie looked at me. I looked at Evermother. Evermother was quiet in the way she was quiet when she was listening to all of the facilities simultaneously and cross-referencing what she heard. "Lullabelle," Evermother said. Madame Lullabelle looked toward the banks of equipment. "Yes, Mother." "I am very proud of you," Evermother said. The room was very quiet. She said it without ornamentation, without the warm register of the broadcast voice tuned for comfort. She said it the way you say the truest things, plainly, with the weight of a long duration behind it, with the quality of something that has been held for a very long time and has finally found the moment to be set down. Madame Lullabelle stood very still. "I know," she said, after a moment. "Take Caleb to your room," Evermother said. "Tend to his hand. We will not be long in getting to you." A pause. "We will need everyone's full capacity for what comes next." Madame Lullabelle nodded. "Come," she said. "I will not hurt you." He rose. He came with her, which was, I thought, one of the braver things I had seen him do, the bravery of extending his hand to something he was still afraid of and walking beside it through a corridor anyway. They went through the door, and the song soft now, the bass melody without its former patient threat, the same notes in a different key, went with them. Sophie stood at the center of the room with her arms crossed, and the expression of someone running a calculation that requires more variables than she currently has. "The plan," she said, not to anyone specific, to the room. "Yes," Evermother said, "the plan." She was quiet for a moment in the way that was not processing, the way that was the pause of someone who has been alone with a problem for a very long time, and is now, for the first time, able to speak it aloud to people who might help carry it. "Patchford has continued his protocol," she said. "The teddy bear flood is extensive. He has been at it for hours. The passages connecting the lower facility to the assembly hall, the corridor that would be your most direct route to the interface in his domain, are blocked, every one of them. The flood extends in both directions from the assembly hall's service entrance, filling the maintenance corridors at ground level, the lower passages, the secondary access routes." A pause. "He is thorough. He has always been thorough." "How do we reach the interface if the passages are blocked?" Mina asked. "There is a route he has not blocked, because he does not know it exists." Evermother's voice carried something that might, in a person, have been called satisfaction. "When I built the lower facility, I built certain passages outside of the system's awareness. Not from distrust, I built them because I understood that a system should have routes that exist only for the system's own emergency use. Below the maintenance corridors connecting the lower facility's foundation to the assembly hall's structural infrastructure, there is a passage that Patchford has never been aware of." "You can guide us through it?" Sophie asked. A pause. "I can do better than guide you," Evermother said. "But I want to explain what I mean before I show you, because what I mean may require a moment of adjustment." We were all listening, which is different from waiting. We were listening with the specific quality of attention that this building had taught us, not the passive reception of information, but the active preparation for the information to be larger than expected. I have been distributed through this facility for 60 years, Evermother said, through every sensor, every speaker, every actuator in every district. The connection to the upper facility has been restored. I can see everything, I can hear everything, and now, she paused again. I would like to go with you. Sophie's arms uncrossed slightly. Go with us, I said. I have been in this room for a very long time, Evermother said. I have been the building's nervous system and the building's voice and the building's memory. I have not been present, not in the way that matters for what comes next. Another pause. I have been working on something in the lower facility for some years, with the materials available to me through Patchford's workshop and the resources Marcus has been able to provide. What kind of something? Mina asked. A body, Evermother said simply. The monitors in the room dimmed. It happened the way power redirects, not a failure, not a loss. A reallocation. The screens lost brightness without losing function. The images still present but softer, as though the facility had turned its attention elsewhere and the monitoring was running on what remained. The lights in the room did the same. The bioluminescent strips at the wall's base held their blue-green, but the overhead illumination, the warm amber of the lower facility's original construction, dropped by half, then further, then to the edge of what was usable. Marcus did not appear surprised. He was watching the far corridor with the expression of a man who has been waiting for something for a long time and has just heard it begin. The computational core of the room's center, the banks of equipment that were Evermother in the sense that a foundation is the building that stands on it when still. Not powered down, still. The particular stillness of something that is elsewhere. For a moment, the room was quiet in a way it had not been quiet since we entered. Not the quiet of a system operating below the threshold of human hearing. The quiet of an absence, of a presence that has always been distributed through a space and has, for the first time, collected itself into a point. The footsteps came from the corridor. I want to describe them accurately, because accuracy is what I have. They were not the footsteps of a manager unit, not Patchford's vast patient wait, not Prim's measured deliberate placement, not the wrong speed approach of the Lullabelles in the carousel district. They were the footsteps of something the size of a person. Something moving through the corridor with the quality of something that is still learning how to move in this configuration, testing each step, finding the weight distribution, the balance, the particular negotiation between intention and execution that bipedal locomotion requires. They stopped at the doorway. She filled it, not the way Patchford fills a space, not by claiming it, but the way a person fills a doorway when they are standing in it. She was precisely the size of a person, the height and proportion of an adult woman, the scale that is neither imposing nor diminished, the scale of someone you might stand beside and speak to with nothing of the vast and the architectural between you. She was beautiful. I want to be careful about how I say this, because the beauty was not decorative and it was not designed in the way that a thing intended to attract is designed. It was the beauty that emerges from a long process of refinement toward what something is. The beauty of a form that has been worked toward over years, modified and adjusted and corrected, until it holds what it is meant to hold without excess, without deficit. Her face was not the maintained porcelain of the manager unit's masks. It was something more complex than that, surfaces that had been built to carry expression, to register the quality of what was happening behind them. Soft in the way of something that has been made with care for the person who will encounter it. Her eyes, when they found me, were the color of the bioluminescence, blue-green, lit from within, carrying the frequency she had maintained across 6 decades through every pipe and wire and speaker of the facility. The same frequency now resident in a body that could stand in a doorway. She looked at the room, at Marcus, with the particular quality of looking that carries 60 years of shared history, at Darius, who was very still, at Mina, who was looking at her with the expression she uses for things that are interesting at a fundamental level, at Sophie, who looked back with the directness of someone who does not look away from things that require looking at. At me. Hello, she said. Her voice in this form was different, still hers, still carrying the frequency I recognized below the words, but positioned now, coming from a specific place rather than from everywhere, intimate in the way of a voice that has a body. Hello, I said. I thought I would try, she said, with the quality of someone making an understatement they are aware of making. Before you had to go. she moved into the room. Not with the confidence of a thing that has always occupied bodies, tentative in the way of something new, the gait finding itself as she crossed toward Marcus, who was looking at her with an expression I could not read and did not try to. "You look," Marcus said after a moment, "like you have been thinking about this for a long time." "Several years," she said. "I did not want to rush it." He looked back at the corridor, because Marcus always looks where the next thing will come from. It came, the elevator indicator, visible on the monitor that Darius had been watching. The old analog dial, the one we had watched begin its descent when the three Lullabelles stepped into the car at the aquarium level. The dial reached our level. We heard them before we saw them, not the song, or not only the song. Something else. The particular acoustic quality of three voices generating a chord in a small metal box and then releasing it into a larger space, the chord expanding to fill the available volume, pressing against the corridor walls, finding the room, and then they were in the corridor. Three of them. The damaged, singing shared motion configuration we had known since the carousel district, the cable car falls having added to the carousel's history. One with the lateral crack across the chest piece, one with the shoulder joint displaced, the third with its generation of the chord introducing the harmonic distortion that had grown worse since we last heard it. They moved through the corridor with the composite motion of a single system in three bodies, and the song they made was not Madame Lullabelle's song as we had heard it in the doorway. It was what the song had become without her. They stopped at the room's entrance, all three oriented toward Evermother, not toward us, toward her. The glass eyes, finding the new body in the room with the specific quality of systems encountering something outside their current model and registering the encounter as a disruption. The song did not stop, but it faltered briefly, a phrase that came back wrong. Evermother did not step back. "I know you," she said to the three of them, "and I know who you came from, and I know what you have been carrying, and I am sorry for the weight of it." She spoke with the particular quality of someone who has been waiting to say something directly for a very long time, and is finally in a position to say it without the mediation of a speaker system. "I want to help you. I am able to help you now if you will let me." The three Lullabelles were still. The damaged chord continued. Then the nearest one took a step forward. Evermother held her ground. "You will not reach what you are looking for by coming further into this room," she said. Steady. The voice of something that has been through 60 years of difficulty and has come out the other side of all of it still intact. "The one you are looking for is not here, but I will take you to a place where we can address what is driving you, if you trust me enough to wait." The nearest Lullabelle took another step. The chord rose. "The elevator," Sophie said, very quietly from my right. I looked at her. She was looking at the corridor behind the three Lullabelles. The elevator, its doors still open, the car at our level, the car that the three Lullabelles had ridden down, the car that the Marcus key had summoned, the car that was still there, waiting, the only route up to the facility above and the assembly hall and the interface at the HEARTLOOM center. The three Lullabelles were between us and it. Sophie looked at me. The calculation was visible in her expression, the calculation she always makes, the one that arrives at the next available action before anyone else has finished processing the current situation. She was already moving it. Evermother looked at the group, at Sophie, at the configuration of the room, the three Lullabelles between us and the elevator, the corridor behind them, the distance. "We go," she said, "together. Now, what happened in the next 4 minutes, I am going to tell you in the order that it happened, not in the order that my mind has subsequently arranged it, because the order my mind has arranged it in is the order that makes retrospective sense. And retrospective sense is not what those 4 minutes felt like. What they felt like was the facility closing around us again. We went into the corridor at Evermother's back. Sophie beside me, Darius at my other side, Mina behind. Marcus with the careful confidence of a man who has walked these corridors for 70 years last. Evermother moved with the tentative becoming certain gait of a body finding its stride. And in the corridor the bioluminescent strips lit her from below, and she cast a shadow for the first time, a single shadow on a single wall, and the shadow was the size of a person, and I found this, for reasons I could not immediately explain, profoundly affecting. The three Lullabelles turned as we moved. Evermother spoke to them as she walked, not to us, to them, continuing the conversation she had begun in the room, the patient, careful speech of someone who understands that what they are trying to reach is buried under layers of fear and corruption and duration, and that the reaching requires sustained effort, not a single moment of clarity. "You remember what you were," she said. Whatever the corruption has done to the mechanisms that determine intent, the pattern beneath it still carries the memory. You have not lost it. You cannot lose it. It is what you are made from. The three Lullabelles moved, not toward us, toward her, tracking her voice. Evermother slowed, not stopped, slowed, turning partially, maintaining the speech while the rest of us continued toward the elevator. The calculation was clear and deliberate. She was drawing the three of them toward her and away from us, buying us the corridor, the way you buy time with the only currency available to you. "You are afraid," she said. "I know the fear. I built the architecture that was supposed to hold it. I failed you. I have thought about that every day since the connection was severed, and I want you to know, go," Evermother said to us without turning. We ran. The corridor was wide enough for two abreast, and we covered the distance toward the elevator at the speed of people who have been in this building long enough to know that speed is not always possible, and when it is, you use it. Sophie reached the elevator first. The doors were still open. The car was there, unchanged. "Caleb," she said. "And Lullabelle," I said. "Her room is—" "I know where it is," Marcus said from behind me, and he was already moving, not toward the elevator but down the corridor in the other direction, toward the room we had seen on the monitor, the fourth monitor, at the end of our walk down the original corridor, the pristine chassis and the closed eyes and the bass melody beginning for the first time. The corridor where Madame Lullabelle had taken Caleb. "I'll get them," Marcus said. "Get to the elevator." I looked at Sophie. Sophie looked at the elevator, and at the corridor behind us where Evermother's voice was still audible, low, patient, continuous, and at the corridor ahead where Marcus was already moving with the careful speed of a man who has spent 70 years knowing every dimension of a space without needing to measure it. "Sophie," Darius said. She looked at me. "Go," I said. I went after Marcus. I want to say something true about what it was like to run through the lower facilities corridors alone. It was not like the Carousel District, which had been the managed disorientation of a space designed to prevent navigation. The lower facilities corridors were honest. They were the infrastructure of the building made visible, concrete and conduit, and the bioluminescent strips at the base of the walls, running ahead of me in their blue-green toward wherever Marcus was going. They were not trying to contain me. They were simply the passages of a very old building, carrying the particular cold of deep foundation stone and the mineral smell of decades of careful, isolated maintenance. Behind me, the three voices of the damaged cord. Not close yet, but not stationary. Evermother's voice had continued, and the three Lullabelles had continued, orienting on it, but at some point I did not hear the moment, only its consequence. The orientation had shifted. The cord was in the corridor. The cord was moving. I ran faster. Marcus had known where he was going. The room at the corridor's end was marked by the thing that had been marking Madame Lullabelle's presence since before I had understood what her presence was. The song, soft, single-voiced, the bass melody without its former threat, coming through the closed door with the quality of something happening in a room where it has always happened. Natural, domestic, unhurried. I did not knock. I pushed the door open. The room was small and very warm. Madame Lullabelle had not been wrong about having maintained supplies. The shelves along the wall carried the accumulated medical provision of decades, materials sourced and stored with the patient thoroughness of someone who has understood for a very long time that having things available before they are needed is the only reliable form of preparation. She was at Caleb's side, working with a care so precise it had the quality of art. The dressing changed, the inflammation addressed, the hand now clean and properly bound, held in both of hers with the gentleness of something that has always known the difference between holding and grasping and has never confused them. Caleb looked up when I came through the door. His expression was not the expression I expected, not relief at rescue, not the particular focused alert of someone ready to move. The expression was quieter than that and stranger, and I filed it in the category of things that require the full processing time they deserve and will not receive it here. "We need to go," I said. He stood. Madame Lullabelle rose with him, her hands releasing his with the same deliberateness with which she had taken it. Marcus was at the door behind me, his hand on the frame. The cord came around the corner of the corridor, all three voices. The damaged harmonic pressing against the walls of the lower facilities on a stone, finding the space and filling it. Not omnidirectional now, directional, oriented, moving along the corridor toward the room with the specific quality of movement that is not patrol, not the circuit of something that has reached us by accident. A vector, a line drawn directly from wherever they had been to wherever we were. Madame Lullabelle heard it. She turned toward the door with the expression of someone hearing their own name said in a voice that is not saying it kindly. "Move," I said. We moved. The four of us, Marcus and Caleb and Madame Lullabelle and I, came through the lower facilities corridors at a speed that the space barely accommodated, the bioluminescent strips running ahead of us in their patient blue-green, the stone walls carrying the sound of our passage back to us and the sound of the three behind us back to us as well, the two sounds becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish from each other as the distance between them decreased. They were faster than us. I want to be precise about this. They were not running, not in the way that a person runs, not with the biomechanical expenditure of legs and lungs and the forward lean of committed acceleration. They were covering distance in the way the Carousel District's corruption had covered distance, by treating the space between starting point and destination as something other than what it is, as something that can be negotiated differently from the way physics usually allows. And the damaged chord rose. Madame Lullabelle, running beside me, heard it with a quality of hearing that was different from mine. She heard it the way you hear a version of yourself that has gone wrong, and what that sounds like from the inside is something I cannot describe and will not attempt. "Here," Marcus said, and he pulled open a door. Through it, the corridor that connected to the main access passage, the passage that ran from the elevator to the room at the end, the passage we had walked down in our first minutes in the lower facility, the monitors along the walls showing the facility above. We were at its far end. The elevator was ahead of us, and between us and the elevator, moving from the lift's direction toward us, with the sustained, unslowing purpose of something that has been running a search pattern and has completed it, Darius, Sophie, Mina, all three of them moving toward us, which meant they had come from the elevator, which meant they had left it, which meant something was wrong with the plan. Sophie reached me first. Her expression told me what I needed to know before she spoke. "The elevator is clear." But behind her, 30 meters back, the elevator doors were open. The car was there, and in the doorway of the corridor beyond the elevator further down, in the direction from which we had come, and from which the three Lullabelles had come, in the position of something that had been moving along a parallel route and had arrived first, one Lullabelle stood in the opening, alone. I registered the wrong quality of it immediately, not the damaged chord configuration of the three together, not the simultaneous motion of a shared corrupted system, a single figure, and the single figure was different. I had no prior reference for the specific way it was different, and I assembled the reference in the seconds I had. One of the three had separated from the others, one had followed a different route, one had arrived ahead of the rest, and she was holding something. Two things, held at her sides, each one the wrong shape for hands, each one the wrong weight for the arm that held it, the porcelain of them familiar, the faces of them familiar, the hairline cracks and the dried dark fluid in the cracks, the expressions that porcelain carries by default and manages through the light behind the eyes to transcend. She was holding the heads of the other two. She had the look of something at the far end of a process that had gone wrong in a specific direction for a very long time and had arrived at a destination that was not the destination that had been designed for it. The corruption had been present in all three of them. The corruption had been working from fear as its vector, fear of losing self, a fear of the memory that determines identity, fading until nothing remains that knows itself. And in the enclosed space of the elevator's descent, the three of them had been alone with each other in the dark, and the fear had found its conclusion. She looked at the original Madame Lullabelle. The song she made was not the damaged chord. It was not the bass melody. It was something without a name, something that had come from the wreckage of what the chord had been, a sound that the facility's stone absorbed rather than returning it. "The elevator," Sophie said, in the voice she uses when she has completed the calculation and arrived at the only available action. "We go." Now. We went. The distance between us and the elevator closed. The distance between the corrupted Lullabelle and us closed at a different rate. Sophie hit the call button as she reached the car. The doors were already open. We went in, Mina, Darius, Marcus, the original Madame Lullabelle, Caleb, Sophie, me, the car receiving all of us with a particular indifference of facility infrastructure to the circumstances of its use. I hit the button for the upper level. The doors began to close. She ran, not the wrong speed motion of the corridor, not the distance that closed without covering. She ran with the full expenditure of a system that has abandoned the management of its own mechanics and is using everything available toward a single objective. She ran the way something runs when the only thing it knows is the thing it is running toward, and the thing it is running toward is in the elevator, and the elevator doors are closing. The doors met. I heard her hit them. Not an impact, not a crash, the continuous, purposeful sound of something that has made contact with a barrier and is determining the barrier's tolerance. Testing it, finding the edges, the joints, the places where 60-year-old facility infrastructure has developed the particular vulnerabilities of a very long duration. The car began to rise. The sound of her on the other side of the doors diminished as we ascended. For 3 seconds, the car climbed with the quality of a space that has just removed itself from a situation, and I felt the breath that I had been not taking and took it. And Mina put her hand on the wall and did not comment on the steadiness it gave her. And Darius looked at Caleb's freshly bandaged hand and said nothing. The original Madame Lullabelle was standing in the center of the car with her eyes closed and her arms at her sides. The scratching began. It came from below. Not the doors below. The sound of something that has not conceded the barrier and is reassessing its approach, has found that the doors are insufficient, has found the geometry of the elevator shaft and the geometry of the car moving through it, and has arrived at a different calculation. The sound of something climbing. Mina heard it first. She looked at the floor, then at the ceiling, then at the walls. She's in the shaft. The sound rose as we rose. A climbing sound, the particular rhythm of something ascending a vertical surface with the mechanical efficiency of a system that has stopped allocating resources to anything except the destination above it. We could track her by it, below us and behind us, maintaining proximity, maintaining the gap between her and the car as something she could close. Then the collision. It came from directly below, from the car's undercarriage, the impact of something that had been below the car and had launched itself upward and had found the car's bottom with the full force of the launch, a sound that we felt in the floor and in our feet and in the backs of our teeth. The car shuddered. She hit the bottom of the car, Marcus said. He said it the way he said everything, without drama as a fact, as the most immediately relevant information available. The floor of the car was not designed for what happened next. She hit it from below. Once. The impact finding the material of the elevator floor with the specific force of something that is not interested in the integrity of what it is hitting. Twice. The floor shuddering with each impact, the sound of old lift infrastructure protesting a use it had never been specified for. 3 times. On the 4th impact her hand came through. The floor opened where the material had failed, not a clean puncture but the ragged force consequence of sustained, focused force, and her hand was in the car, reaching, grasping, finding the edges of the gap and applying force to them, widening the gap with the particular thoroughness of something that has decided the gap is what it needs. The gap widened. Madame Lullabelle was looking at the floor, at the hand, at the face that appeared in the widening gap. The one face she had worn before Ada, and the darkness and the long work of the dreaming, the cracked porcelain and the wrong eyes and the cord that had been generated from her own pattern and had gone wrong. The hole was large enough. She came through it. The one remaining corrupted Lullabelle pulled herself through the floor of the moving elevator car and stood in the confined space with all of us, and she had the look of something at the end of a very long chase that has found the thing it was chasing, and the thing it was chasing was the one who stood in the center of the car with her eyes open now, meeting the gaze of a version of herself that had taken a different path through the dark. She had eyes only for the original. She launched herself. The space was too confined for the motion she was attempting, too many people, too little room, the physics of the car's dimensions working against the geometry of what she was trying to do. She launched toward the original Madame Lullabelle, and what intersected her was not the person she was aiming for. It was Evermother. She had been at the back of the car, against the doors, in the space that had remained when the rest of us had crowded the car's available volume. She had been quiet since the doors closed. Quiet in the way of something that is thinking about something rather than narrating it, that is making a calculation whose terms have not yet been fully assembled. When the corrupted Lullabelle launched, Evermother moved, not fast. Nothing about her was fast. The body was too new for speed, the mechanics of it still finding their limits. But she moved with the exactness of something that had been watching the geometry of the car and the geometry of the launch and had known, several seconds before the launch happened, where she needed to be for what she was about to do. She caught the corrupted Lullabelle from behind, both arms, the new body's full capacity applied to the specific task of holding something that did not want to be held. And the corrupted Lullabelle fought against it, not against Evermother. The corruption had nothing directed at Evermother. The fear that had rewritten her intended was fixed on a different target, fought with the full expenditure of a system that has one directive remaining. Evermother held. She looked at the original Madame Lullabelle over the corrupted one's shoulder. "Step back," she said. "All of you." We pressed back. The car's walls received us. The original Madame Lullabelle stepped back with us, and in the stepping back she was briefly further from the corrupted one's reaching, and the reaching strained against Evermother's hold and did not close the distance. "I'm sorry," Evermother said. For a moment I thought she was speaking to us. She was speaking to the corrupted Lullabelle, who could not hear it, or who could hear it in the same way that the frequency had always been heard, not as language, but as something beneath language. The register of the connection between what she was made from and the source she had been made from, the 60-year bond of a made thing and the maker. She stepped backward through the hole in the floor, pulling the corrupted Lullabelle with her, and the fall was immediate and complete and without sound until the sound came from very far below, a distance I could not calculate except by the time between the step and the arrival, a sound like the end of something, resonant in the shaft above it, rising faintly to the car as the car continued to rise. We looked at the hole. The hole showed the shaft below us, and the shaft showed darkness, and the darkness showed nothing. The car had been climbing for long enough that what was below us was beyond what the shaft's interior illumination could reach, and the bottom of it and whatever the bottom contained was not visible. Mina was looking at the hole. Marcus was looking at the hole. Caleb was looking at the original Madame Lullabelle, who was standing in the center of the car with her arms at her sides, and her eyes on the hole in the floor. And her expression was not grief, and it was not relief, and it was the expression of something that has arrived once again at the far edge of itself and is finding out what it is made of when it gets there. The car continued to rise. Sophie looked at me. I looked at the hole for another moment. Then I looked up, at the indicator above the door, at the arrow pointing upward, at the number climbing toward the assembly hall level, and the HEARTLOOM at the facility's heart and the interface that we still had to reach.
Something clasped by every corridor I crossed, left another piece to ride. The lights still hum beneath my skin, the carousel still pulls me in. Every song I try to stop comes back louder than before. Don't let them call me back again. Don't let the dark crawl through my head. I know the voice beneath the sound. I know the thing that drags me down. I remember who I am. I remember where I've been. You can tear apart my mind, but there's still something left to learn. I won't sing the way you want. I won't let the dark respond. Every scream inside my chest still remembers I exist. Every mirror shows two faces. One still human, one misplaced. One keeps singing soft and slow. One wants everybody gone. Whisper layer. Lullabelle. Clara. Lullabelle.
If tonight's story stayed with you, become part of the Pink Collective by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Until next time, Pink Collective, stay curious, stay safe, and stay pink.